Have you ever thought about what it would be like to live in a time when everyone was counting down to zero? A moment when an entire society believed that peace was just the quiet before the storm? Well, today we're diving into exactly that, a concept known as the appointed time for judgment.
Now, just so we're all on the same page, everything we're about to explore is a deep dive into Chapter 19 from the book series The Wars of Latent Darkness. It presents a really compelling and honestly a pretty challenging view of this incredibly volatile period in history. So let's just jump right into the big puzzle. When you hear the word Essenes, the group connected to the Dead Sea Scrolls, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's these peaceful, super devout monks living out in the desert, right? But what if that was only half the story? What if they were actually revolutionaries just waiting for a signal? And this is where it gets really interesting. On the one hand, you've got this public image they projected, this celebrated pacifism, the whole turn the other cheek vibe, and a strict policy of not fighting back. But then you look at what their hidden scrolls reveal, and it's a completely different story. We're talking about a planned apocalyptic war to destroy Rome, a fiery zeal to literally annihilate their enemies, who they called the Sons of Darkness, and a goal to build their own eternal kingdom right here on Earth. And look, this isn't just us guessing. This is a direct quote from their own writings. Everlasting hatred for the men of the pit. He should be a man zealous for the decree and for his time, for the day of revenge. I mean, come on, those are not the words of your average peace-loving monk. This shows a deep, burning belief that a day of violent revenge was not just possible, but promised. And this all hinges on one key idea, the appointed time for judgment. For them, being peaceful was just a temporary strategy. It was an interim policy for what they called the Age of Wrath. They were convinced that a very specific prophesied moment was coming, and when it did, that peace would be over, and they, as the Sons of Light, would get the divine green light to rise up and completely destroy their enemies. It was literally a ticking clock. Okay, so if this is all true, why isn't this the version of the story we all know? Well, that question leads us directly to the main historian of that time, a guy named Flavius Josephus, and the very real possibility that his version of history might have been, let's just say, a very clever spin. So Josephus wrote a ton about the Essenes. He praised them, talked about how pious and peaceful they were, but as The Wars of Light and Darkness points out, his official history has this massive, glaring omission. He just conveniently forgot to mention their single most important belief, the violent, apocalyptic overthrow of Rome and its collaborators. So you might be asking, what did he do with the Essenes who didn't fit his peaceful mold? The ones who jumped the gun and started fighting? Simple. He just relabeled them. He dismissed any of the more militant groups as nothing more than a nest of robbers. It was a brilliant way to discredit them and cut their connection to the main Essene movement, at least in the history books. But here's the thing, Josephus wasn't the only one writing about this. Other sources tell a very different story. An early church historian named Hippolytus flat out said the Essenes were the same as the Zealots and the Sicarii, the infamous dagger men. And modern scholars tend to agree, especially since Essene texts were found at Masada, the last Zealot fortress. The source even argues that Josephus invented a whole new category called the Fourth Philosophy just to muddy the waters and hide who these groups really were. So if the neat little categories that Josephus gave us, Pharisees, Sadducees, and Essenes, were maybe just a distraction, what was the real fight about? The Wars of Light and Darkness argues that the real division in that society was something much, much deeper. And this, right here, shows you the real battle lines. This wasn't about small religious disagreements. This was a total clash of worldviews. On one side, the Sons of Light. They used a unique 364-day solar calendar, believed the apocalypse was imminent, were fiercely anti-Roman, and thought the official priesthood in Jerusalem was totally illegitimate. On the other side, the Sons of Darkness. They used the mainstream Babylonian lunar calendar, thought the apocalypse was a distant idea, worked with Rome, and supported the powerful priests in charge. These two sides couldn't have been more different. There was no middle ground. So what happens when you're counting down to the end of the world, and then the day comes and goes, and nothing happens? Did they all just give up? Oh, not even close. The failure of the world to end on schedule just led them to recalculate the date and to get even more violent. Just take a look at how this played out. Around 60 BCE, after the first appointed time passed without incident,
They just recalculated a new date. This happened to be right when Rome was conquering the area. Then they set a new date for 4 BCE, and like clockwork, that's when the first huge Zealot revolt exploded. Then they set another date for 6 CE, and bam, another massive revolt. Every single failed prophecy didn't make them lose faith. It directly led to another bloody rebellion. And you can see where this is all headed, right? Each delay, each new calculation just added more fuel to this apocalyptic fire. It radicalized people, leading to the emergence of even more extreme groups like the Sicarii. And this whole escalating cycle of violence eventually just boiled over into the Great Jewish Revolt against Rome in 66 CE. And this whole idea of an appointed time wasn't some weird fringe belief that was kept secret in a desert compound. It was everywhere. It was in the very air people breathed. I mean, think about this. In the Gospel of Matthew, even demons are quoted as knowing about this divine schedule. They ask Jesus, "Have you come here to torment us before the appointed time?" That one line tells you just how deeply this idea of a cosmic deadline was baked into the culture itself.
So where does that leave us? Well, we know that Josephus wrote his history while being paid by the Roman emperor who won the war. He was literally writing for the victors. And it really makes you wonder, if his account of the Essenes was a deliberate political spin to make his patrons look good, what other truths about our past are still out there, just hidden in the margins, waiting for someone to find them?
If you found this as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more explainers like this one. And if you really want to go deeper and get the full story, you can purchase the entire volume from the Wars of Light and Darkness series. The link for that is right down in the description. Thanks so much for watching.